Good evening, everybody. The Music Fan is back, bringing smiles to the faces, knowledge to the people, and most importantly, music to the masses. And I'm here to start off my 2021 end of the year lists. Yes, I know it is the end of March, but I had a lot of albums to listen to and re listen to, and I wanted to make sure I had the best list possible. Because honestly, if the Grammys can push back their awards for 2021, so can I. So this year I listened to about 230 albums, and I have a lot to talk about, a lot to catch up on, and we're going to do this here. So, like previous years, we're going to start off with me looking at the consensus top 50 list from albumoftheyear.org, and I go over it and critique where I see fit. From there, I'm going to do something new this time. Instead of doing top 10 worst albums of the year, I'm actually going to do my top 50 songs of the year. Something that I haven't done before, and it was a completely different challenge, but one that was super fun to do. After that, I will go over my honorable mentions and then get through the top 50. So each video will be going over 10. So 50 through 41, 40 to 31, so on and so forth. And then the last few videos will be with a special guest as we go over our top 10. I am super excited to finally get done with this because I've been putting a lot of effort into this. Starting from like mid-December, I've listened to so many albums, and then January 15th is when I started re-listening to 100 different albums, and yeah, I've been putting out a lot of effort, so hopefully you enjoy this. So let's get going. So this is a video on the consensus top 50 list from albumoftheyear.org. I've talked about this before a few different times, but what this basically does is it takes all of the lists from different websites about their end of the year lists, and then they rank it based on how many points. So for example, if a certain website gives somebody the number one spot in their poll, then they get 10 points, and so on and so forth. They tally everything and they figure out what album got the best points. This particular time around, there was 130 different websites that put out a poll, some from America, some from United Kingdom, from all over the world. But I have noticed that most of these lists do center more towards American music as well as UK music. So bear that in mind. Also, something else to bear in mind: this list doesn't really do a lot with hard rock and metal. I've noticed that a lot of times, places like Revolver, when they put out their end of the year list, it's usually in the beginning of the year, so you probably see some more metal stuff in the consensus, and then that definitely goes down as time goes on. So that is one critique that I will start off with, that even though there's a lot of really good albums on this list, there's also a lot of stuff that isn't really given any light, just because a lot of end of the year lists don't really go over rock or jazz or other subgenres. So bear that in mind as we go on. Let's dive into the top 50 list. For stuff that will be on my honorable mentions or my top 50, I'm not really going to go over a lot of. I want to spend more time talking about it in a different video, but we'll talk a little bit more in depth about the stuff that just didn't make any of my lists. So starting off with number 50 with 49 points, we have Casey Musgraves with Star Crossed. I liked the last album by Casey Musgraves. It was a golden hour. It made me like a little bit more of that pop country feel. This one has some decent songs, but overall, it just lacks the depth to be memorable for me. Not really something that I enjoy all the way through. Then at 49, also with 49 points, we have Dean Blunt and Black Metal 2. Apparently, this is an album that a lot of people were looking really forward to. I had never heard of the first album. Check this one out. Short album, really interesting, but kind of sporadic, and didn't really grip me with the time that it had. Next, with number 48, with also 49 points, we have The Bug with Fire. This one starts off cool. I like this darker techno-ish idea, and I like the concept where it felt kind of like Armageddon-ish, where we finally hit the breaking point with all the shit that we've done to the world, and now everything's burning. However, this did feel a little bit one note as we go on, and it didn't keep my interest the whole entire time through. Number 47, with 50 points, we have Sleaford Mods with Spare Ribs. I did not enjoy this at all, guys. I've heard of Sleaford Mods before. To me, the appeal kind of feels like two Cockney British performers just kind of being a little bit over the top. I didn't see the appeal. If someone can tell me another album to check out from them, I would like to, because I've heard a lot about this band, but to me, I didn't see it at all. Number 46 with 52 points, we have Summer Walker with Still Over It. Really solid R&B hip hop album, but again, it just wasn't super memorable in my opinion. If I got a couple more times through, might have made my honorable mentions. There are some decent stuff on there, but with the one or two times I got to listen to it, didn't really leave much of an impression. Number 45 with 53 points, we have Salt with 9. I loved the last two albums from Salt from 2020. Those felt really yin and yang in terms of police brutality and the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that was going on in the Black community. A super interesting dive into that with the anger, but also the wanting for better and expressing Black positivity. Both of those albums made my top 10. And I was really looking forward to this one because this one's an interesting concept. This album only came out for, I believe, 90 days and then was gone. Decent album. I was going to make an album review on it and I was trying to find the right way of approaching it. For me, the biggest issue that I have is, even though there's a lot of really interesting takes on gang life and street life in the UK, and there's a really awesome cameo from Little Sims on Are You From London, which is really tongue-in-cheek, and I love that. The issue that I have is a lot of this album feels like there's bits and pieces, and then there's a lot of filler. It feels like they are filling in moments to make it longer than it needs to be. I think this could have been better as an EP with not as much filler, and you would still been able to get the same result. Even on Are You From London, there's a part in there where there's like basically what feels like the length of a verse of just filler. So I wish I enjoyed this better, but there's still some decent stuff on there. And if you got a chance to listen to it, I think it was an alright CD. Number 44 with 53 points, we have The Armed with Ultra Pop. I was trying to remember why I remembered this name. And as I started listening to it first, it popped into my head. My friend Frankie introduced me to this band a very long time ago with their previous album, and it was an album that I not necessarily hated, but more was afraid of. There was just a mix of this like black metal electronic ideas that was just a little bit too over the top for me and made me feel super uncomfortable. So when I checked this one out, I was pleasantly surprised. It kind of blew me away in terms of the diversity this time around. There was some more slow burn songs. There was a little bit more accessible songs. So to me, yeah, this is the best of the ARM albums that I have listened to. It barely missed my honorable mentions. Still, check it out. It's an interesting ride. I definitely get the hype about this album. Number 43 with 54 points, we have Silk Sonic with An Evening with Silk Sonic. Let's just get this out of the way. This is definitely coming on my list. I think that this is way too low. Yeah, this is a short album with only 9 tracks, and technically 8 because the first one is an intro, but this is the most fun I had with an album all year. The arrangements are fantastic. Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak work so well together, and I think this album needs to be higher on the list, even if it is an homage to 70s funk and soul. Like, this is still worth your time. Such a fun, bite-sized album. Number 42 with 56 points is Clairo with Sling. This did make it onto my honorable mentions. I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but I like a lot of this. There's a lot of really vulnerable moments, especially like the song Blouse, but I think sometimes this goes from being really sweet to a little bit too overproduced in terms of layers at points. So as much as I like a bunch of the songs on there, there are some ones that I tend to pull away from because of the overproduction. Number 41 with 56 points, we have Mogwai with As the Love Continues. Honestly, this was a very unmemorable album. Very atmospheric, but that's all I can remember. That's all I got. This is my first Mogwai album. I've heard the name before. I've never tried this out until now. So if this is their style, I'm probably going to stay away from them. But if you have any other Mogwai albums that you can recommend, let me know, because I would like to figure them out, because I've heard of them for years. Number 40 with 56 points, we have Sam Fender with 17 Going Under. This was an album that kind of surprised me. I had heard of the voice before, but I couldn't figure out where until I remembered I've heard the song Hypersonic Missiles, which I think is a really catchy song, really kind of tongue-in-cheek, nihilistic song. And a lot of this album does share that nihilism at times. Definitely made my list. I'll talk more about it later. Number 39 with 57 points, we have For Those I Love with For Those I Love. This is a really interesting album, strictly because this is a dance hall, techno, EDM album based around the musician losing a close friend of his. And this is his way of dealing with the death and the depression afterwards. A really vulnerable album. It's more storytelling wise. He's more speaking in poetry rather than he is ever singing. The particular samples that are used are also really interesting, especially the one where he uses the tracks of my tears. This definitely hit home at times, but it just missed my honorable mentions. Still, check this out. It's one of the more interesting albums I got to listen to all year. Number 38 with 60 points, we have Amel and the Sniffers with Comfort to Me. An interesting British pop punk album. Very short, very interesting. The lead singer has some interesting vocal techniques. Not something that I got a lot of replay with, but if I checked it out again, maybe would have made my honorable mentions. Still, a decent album. Yeah, that's all I got. Number 37 with 63 points, we have Lorraine with Fatigue. One that I didn't get a lot of playtime with, so unfortunately I don't remember a lot. Had some interesting ideas, but unfortunately wasn't really memorable in my eyes, so didn't really make the cut. Number 36 with 66 points, there was Mac Homie with Pray for Haiti. I saw this album got a lot of praise, but I think this is a style of rap that I haven't really ever really gotten into, other than some artists. So for me, it just didn't make the cut. Number 35 with 67 points, you have Vince Staples with Vince Staples. I've noticed recently that Vince Staples has been doing a lot more shorter albums, especially with FM as his previous work. This one, decent, but again, I think it was a little bit too short for me to latch onto. And for it being that short, there were a couple songs I just wasn't a huge fan of. So while it still has memorable moments, for me, didn't really stick out. Number 34 with 68 points, you have Madlib with Sound Ancestors. My first dive into Madlib's work, and it was really interesting, really diverse in the arrangements and the samplings that he was using. It was a fun album to listen to, but again, just fell a little bit short in terms of my honorable mentions. Number 33 with 68 points, you have Black Midi and Cavalcade. This album was a lot better than I expected it was going to be. I checked out the previous album from Black Midi a couple years ago and found the lead singer's voice to be super grating, even if there were some interesting arrangements. This one is a lot more beautiful, and the lead singer's voice works so much better on this album than the previous one. So this made my list. I'm really excited to see what Black Midi does next. Number 32 with 73 points, we have Idols and Crawler. This was a disappointing album in my opinion. I have liked the last few albums from Idols, Joy as an Act of Resistance, as well as Ultramono. This one just didn't keep that momentum going. There are some songs that just use that aggression that Idols is known for, like Meds or Stockholm Syndrome. But a lot of this album was a lot more sedated than usual. I do enjoy that the lead singer was using his singing voice a lot more. There are some parts which are actually beautiful from him. But for the most part, it just kind of fell short on a whole. Number 31 with 75 points, we have Doja Cat with Her. Not bad. decent pop album, but not memorable in terms of all the other pop albums that came out this year. Number 30 with 78 points is Lana Del Rey with Chemtrails Over the Country. I really enjoyed Norman fucking Rockwell. Unfortunately, this one in comparison is kind of boring, to be honest. I don't think either of the albums from Lana Del Rey this year were that memorable. A lot of the stuff that's on Chemtrails Over the Country Club doesn't really stick. It's because a lot of the stuff feels a little bit too monotone, too repetitive, or it overstays its welcome. My favorite song on the album turns out to be actually just a cover of another song. So even the best parts of this album aren't even original in terms of what Lana Del Rey has done before. I hope that her next album blows me away, because I've had a love-hate relationship with Lana Del Rey for a very long time now, and I really hope that Norman fucking Rockwell isn't the crowning achievement in her discography. Number 29 with 83 points, we have Julian Baker and Little Oblivions. I have really enjoyed a lot of what has come out from the Boy Genius trio. Lucy Dacus has been the best in my opinion, but Phoebe Bridgers put out a solid album last year. To me though, this particular album from Julian Baker was not memorable in comparison to the other two. There's some decent songs, but in comparison to Lucy Dacus and Phoebe Bridgers, her particular album was lacking. I hope that a Boy Genius album comes out soon, or another album of hers, because I would love to give her another chance. Number 28 with 86 points, we have Pink Panthers and To Hell With It. Another short album bringing back a certain vibe that I did not think needed to be brought back. This kind of like 2000s, late 90s, how would I explain it? Think like Eiffel 65 or bands like that. It brings back a vibe that I had not heard in a long time, and it's surprisingly fun. But again, it's a little bit too short, and it's not necessarily something that I would go back to. Still really, really interesting. If you just want a nostalgic trip, check it out. Number 27 with 87 points, we have Cassandra Jenkins with an overview on Phenomenal Nature. This album put me to sleep. And it's not saying that's a bad thing. It's just a little bit too meditative. I find it beautiful in parts, but I honestly don't remember much of it because it is too serene, too meditative at times. And finally, to wrap up this part of the video, we have at number 26 with 88 points, Dave and We're All Alone in This Together. I enjoyed his previous work a couple of years ago, and this one just adds more fuel to the fire. He is doing really great on this album, and he's tackling a bunch of different hard topics, especially with like immigration into the UK. Even has a beautiful song about messing up in a relationship, where the cool effect here is that he starts rapping and then a female guest vocalist comes on and plays his ex. This definitely made my list, and I can't wait to talk more about it. But we come to the end of this particular video. In the next video, I will go over 25 through 1 on the albumoftheyear.org's top 50 list. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, a few things you can do. 1, like this video. 2, let me know albums from 2021 that made your top list or your top worst list. 3rd, if you haven't, please subscribe to my channel. That way I know you enjoy what I'm doing and want to see more stuff like this in the future. I will be back tomorrow with part 2 of this deep dive into the albumoftheyear.org list. Until then, this is Music Fan, and I'm signing off.